Everybody, that was a very quick adjustment to quiet. I appreciate it. All right, we have one microphone for our speakers. I'm going to ask y'all to pass this around. But I want to draw attention first to the fact that there is one empty chair here, and this is very much on purpose. So like Jeff was talking about before, this is supposed to be a dialogue. This is supposed to be a discussion, and we're here, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be also. So if at any time you have something to add to the conversation, a point you'd like to make, a question you'd like to ask, please feel free to come and sit in this chair and to say your piece or to ask your question. If someone's already sitting in that chair, but you still want to come up, please do. Tap us on the shoulder and one of us can happily give you our chair so you can ask your question and make your point. If at any time during this session you have other questions you'd like to ask or points you'd like to make, but you don't feel comfortable coming to sit in this chair, raise your hand and we'll bring a microphone to you. But we really do want to talk to you all as much as possible. And if you need the Wi-Fi, it's on the back wall. Appreciate it. Okay. So I want to get started by saying a huge thank you to everybody for being here today. This is very exciting to us and is the result of so many fantastic conversations over the last year. And like what Jeff was talking about, you know, this idea kind of formed during the last summit in Inuvik, and it's pretty amazing to have traveled from that location to this one and be here with all of you. So thank you. And I also want to say a huge thank you to our speakers this morning. I'm going to go ahead and let them introduce themselves because you all have incredible stories and I don't want to mix any of them up. So Michele, if you'd like to start.
Hi, I'm Michele Beck. I'm the Vice President of North American Sales at Telesat. I have an engineering background. I've worked for actually the past 30 years as an engineer, responsible for the design of satellite networks to deliver, in part, broadband connectivity to many remote and northern communities across Canada. I've been with the organization now close to 30 some odd years, and I'm very happy to be here today to speak to you about our experience.
Thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Kat Blake. I'm the Senior Manager at Next Century Cities. And at Next Century Cities, we work with local governments throughout the United States on connectivity initiatives. We work with 209 member communities, and they're extremely diverse. We work with large metro areas and small rural communities and everything in between. And we're model agnostic, so we work with those communities to help them decide what connectivity model is best for them. So that's been really exciting to see how that model is different, creative, locally grown solutions that can happen. So I'm really excited to be here and to learn from all of you as well. So thanks for having me.
Aloha, everybody. My name is Burt. If you want to find out about me, just go and Google bite marks with a Y. I have a long history in Hawaii's tech and telecom sector. And but I don't want any of you to end up calling me uncle, okay? No, call me uncle. So what I wanted to tell you is that, you know, I had the fortune of, for the most part, you know, being in the private sector and watching how things like networking and computing and things like the internet came to bear on you know, just the community at large. And and through the course of my, you know, sort of history, I had the interesting opportunity to explore the intersection between technology and civic engagement. And my most recent position is with the state of Hawaii, so don't hold that against me. I have been there for a little more than a year and a half. So just this January will make it 2 years. And I'm the broadband strategy officer. So through the course of sort of my history, private sector, kind of being in a nonprofit space, and then also having the opportunity to actually make a difference, you know, in my delusional state, is to try to go into government and actually help try to change things inside government.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate that. So the topic of this discussion is kind of to set the stage for where we are and I hope where we're headed. So I'm wondering if each of you could spend a little bit of time talking about how you view the state of connectivity in your work.
Sure, I'll start. I work primarily throughout Canada, and Canada, like most other countries around the world, has underserved and non-served parts of the country. So in Canada, we're 1/10 the population of the US, and there are approximately today 2.4 million households that don't have access to good broadband connectivity or any broadband connectivity. I know the numbers in the US, 25 by 3 megabit per second service. There's probably over 22 million households that don't have access to that type of connectivity. And it's a problem. A lot of the economies and educational systems, health systems rely on good broadband connectivity. And we have been at Telesat as a satellite operator working with communities to connect them and to bring that long-haul trunk connection. And when you're living in very northern or Arctic-based communities, the chance of ever getting fiber is pretty slim. It's very, very costly to drive fiber up, and it's very risky because it's easy to break with ice shearing and so on. And so we try to find alternative solutions to serve these various communities. And it was always state-of-the-art technology, and we've been making certainly inroads in connecting many communities up north, so the Northern Territories as well the northern parts of the provinces throughout Canada. We're always actively looking for new solutions based on innovative technologies to go even further. And we're just on the brink of actually launching a brand new satellite constellation of LEO, low Earth orbit satellites, and I'll be talking about that a little bit more, I guess, as we progress the discussion. But it definitely, connectivity is a problem, continues to be a problem. There are some solutions, but ultimately now I think we're just on the brink of being able to connect every single community with fiber-like connectivity, and it's not just here in North America, it's around the world.
So from my perspective, working with local governments in the United States, there is certainly a connectivity gap that exists, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and the problem is a little bit different in every community. And oftentimes, at least at the federal level, the problem is spoken about in terms of access and the state of infrastructure deployment in the United States, and success is measured by how many folks have access to a nearby network. And I think that the problem is a little bit more complicated and a little bit more layered than that. And I think we need to be thinking about not just where a network's available, but are they working for communities in the way that they should be? Not just do we have access, but can everyone afford access? Is everyone equipped with the technical skills that they would need in order to take full advantage of that access? One conversation that my organization tries to elevate is the issue of mobile-only access. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful thing to have cell phone access and to have access to the internet via a mobile subscription, but I don't think we should just be satisfied with answering the question, can I load a web page? I think that a lot of communities are working for strong access at home and access that works well. And something that I'm excited to see is this is increasingly happening more and more at the community level. And I think that that's really exciting. A lot of great solutions are happening when the community steps in and says, this monopoly system isn't working for my community, or we have access, but it's not reaching every pocket of the community in the way that it should. And so we're going to work with our own community and take this into our own hands to really talk thoroughly about what we need. And we're increasingly seeing community-driven solutions. So I'm excited about that.
So in the in the remaining time, I'll just expound on the connectivity in Hawaii. No, I'm just kidding. So connectivity in Hawaii, that's a really interesting topic, and it's pretty near and dear to my heart. I've been involved with telecom for many years, but one of the things I want to start off by saying is that in Hawaii, it's interesting. I mean, we are in the middle of the Pacific, 2,500 miles of ocean surround us. But at the same time, Hawaii has been very successful at marketing itself as a destination. So it's a pretty well-known urban location, especially if you go to places like Honolulu. And what's interesting is that as the broadband guy, I would sort of talk to communities and ask them, by the way, where do you get your internet from? And oftentimes they'll say, well, we'll get it from, I don't know, the cable company or the telephone company. And I go, oh yeah, okay, so where do you think they get it from? And most of them respond by saying, doesn't it just come from the air? And I look at them, I go, well, no, it doesn't. It really depends on things like submarine fiber cables. And they have this sort of like look on their face like, really? You mean like under the ocean? I go, yeah, I mean, that's how we, basically get our connectivity. And so when I got involved, at the state of Hawaii, and I started to look at some of the key kind of elements that would enable connectivity, I would look at the whole spectrum from submarine fiber cables and how do they land on the land, how do you get terrestrial backhaul, which is how do you get, on the land, how do you connect the islands via inter-island fiber. What are some of the new technologies like 5G that are now coming to bear? And most importantly is, how do rural communities get access to all of this? And as we probably all know, the major corporations aren't, well, they'll say to the leadership of whatever, whoever they're pitching, they're saying, yeah, we'll get to the rural communities. I was recently at a conference in Hawaii, and it was one of the major wireless providers, and he was talking about 5G deployment, and I asked him, so in terms of 5G deployment, what are your plans for rural communities? And he looked at me and said, oh, we have it in our plans to connect a million users via 5G. I go, wow, that's pretty good. So where exactly are those million people? Are any of them in Hawaii? And so he looked at me and said, well, I don't know that, but I'll check. So in other words, rural communities aren't going to get that kind of capacity. So in Hawaii, one of the key things is, especially the fortune of having Internet Society involved with looking at indigenous communities and rural communities, and how do we bring some of that technology to enable self-determination in places where corporations really aren't that interested. They're just interested in trying to get an immediate return on their investment. So, this whole span of connectivity in Hawaii has a number of different nuances that aren't just simply, how do we get access to rural communities. In our case, and we'll talk to Bumpy more later on today and tomorrow, is the idea of how do partnerships really foster the enabling of connectivity. And I'll get into more detail later on, but there's a lot that can be done if you understand where the gaps are and how do you pull the right people together to help close those gaps.
No, absolutely. And I think you all each hit on some really important themes. And it's interesting to me that we've already touched on similar things because of the regions that you each work on. Working in the Arctic seems in theory very different than working in Hawaii or working in, some urban areas in the US. And yet I'm hearing each of you talk about the the importance of those partnerships and community consultation or engagement and of getting access to infrastructure and things like that, which I think when you first start talking about internet connectivity, maybe aren't the things that you think about, you know? And so I want to talk a little bit more about some of those themes, especially on the role of smaller providers, and we'll talk more. I don't know if Brandon or Bumpy are in the room right now. Yes, but we'll talk more about the network that's going to be developed in Waimanalo later today and tomorrow. That's a really good example of an opportunity for community consultation and a new small provider, and working with the government and working with, you know, different industry partners and bringing those stakeholders together to get access to this amazing resource. So I'm wondering if you all can touch on a couple different things from each of your perspectives. One, how do you seek out partnerships, and how do you work between stakeholder groups? I know it's a lot of different themes, but I think they fit.
So to start off with, you know, one like this that allows us to make contact with groups that have a common interest, that need connectivity. We work with local, and I would call it like local governments, local interest groups, and I'll give an example, which was a very, very good example just recently, and it's the territorial government of Nunavut, which is a territory in northern Canada, 1,000 population. They're spread across 25 communities, and they are completely reliant on satellite. The only way in and out of those communities is fly-in and or barge during the summer months. There is no other means to reach any of these 25 communities. And so we worked with them very, very closely to understand their requirements, both from the government perspective as well as from the community basis. And we designed solutions kind of hand in glove working with them. And it was a partnership. It was ourselves looking at how to bring in that long haul connectivity into these communities. And it was the local governments pulling together all of the requirements across all of these communities, understanding what they needed from health and the education perspective, and for economic growth and development, and the capacity that they required just to sustain their own operations. And, you know, they've indicated to us just most recently, it's their desire really to go into the cloud. That they don't want to have to maintain even hardware solutions across their territory. It's expensive. And they've got to physically fly to the various communities to manage and to maintain that. They would like to actually house that in the cloud, always relying on you know, the services to provide the best software applications, security upgrades to ensure that their networks are basically up to par, 24/7, 365 days a year. And then they brought together a local ISP to deliver locally the connectivity. And with that, and they didn't have actually even wireless services. They had wireless services in the 4 or 5 top communities. So working as a partnership, ourselves, the local government, and the local ISP, we are able to connect all 25 communities with broadband connectivity. We use state-of-the-art technological solutions. In some of these communities, we're delivering gigabits worth of connectivity to these communities. It has transformed the landscape across the board. And So we're about to embark actually on different phases and even upgrade beyond what we're providing today as a stepping stone. They are very excited. We are conducting trials with them, and we're going to take it to the next level in the next couple of years.
Thanks. So one thing that I love about working with 209 local governments across the U.S. is that you really get to see partnerships are different in every community, and how that network model of how is my community going to get connected and how will this best work for us looks totally different in all of the communities that we work with. And partnerships are really key to making that happen. And I think across the board, we see that these work well when everyone starts by talking about the goals of connectivity. So it's not always a conversation about, a 25.3 megabit connection. It's what does this mean for us? And that's a little bit different in every community, and that's definitely different for every stakeholder group. But connectivity does impact every stakeholder in the community. So, it might be particularly important for one community to have access to healthcare via the internet. In other communities, language revitalization is extremely important. It's a little bit different, but we see across the board that partnerships really gain traction when you talk about what those outcomes are. It's not always a conversation about the internet per se. And then when you move from there, I think a good partnership comes when everyone has a really frank conversation about what role they would like to play, and that means what am I willing to take on and what am I willing to give up. And we see this in working with city governments across the US. Often a city government will say it's a really natural role for us to build infrastructure in our community. Like, we feel really comfortable figuring out how to finance infrastructure. We know how to tear up roads and lay down fiber, but we don't really know how to operate a network, and maybe that's not something we're really comfortable doing, and that's not something we're interested in. And a partner will come in and say, well, that's our forte, but we don't want to manage the network. And figure to put those pieces together results in a really strong partnership, but it starts with a frank conversation. And I think those conversations are most valuable when the community is engaged and when those decisions are made as a group. So, yeah.
That's that's really well said. In fact, I would second that. Oftentimes, what happens is that there are, whether they're corporations or governments, they're kind of working in a silo, so to speak, and it really takes people like what we have here on the panel to actually help bridge some of those silos. And the work that I see myself doing, we have a boatload of money that we can throw at this. What we do have is at least my time to want to get out there and make something happen. In Hawaii, it's not so different from anywhere else. It's about how do we stay relevant in the 21st century. And one of the key things that this technology enables is for us in Hawaii to be not so much a consumer, but a producer of knowledge, a producer of content, a producer of applications that now leverage this digital infrastructure to connect us to the rest of the world. So how do we take advantage of that? And so the work that I do is trying to find the right people that share in that vision to help elevate, where Hawaii is going in the 21st century. And I would be doing this whether I was working in the government or not. But for the I guess for the fact that I'm lucky and I'm in the government, I can continue to work on this and try to see how we can elevate Hawaii's position, since we are very isolated and we only have a very small market. So our market here is just 1 million people. So just selling into the market isn't going to really create any kind of business, and it's not going to really offer the creation of wealth. It's going to be, how do businesses in Hawaii elevate beyond the local community and elevate beyond just Hawaii? And one of the people I want to bring attention to is the fact that Nainoa Thompson, who did the worldwide voyage, and if you're not aware of it, just Google worldwide voyage, and he took Hokulea, which is a voyaging canoe, around the world and connected indigenous communities by just the fact that he voyaged there and shared the knowledge that he had. So can we, in technology, take that and do something similar and share the value and knowledge that we have in Hawaii around the world? And that's something that, you know, if you think of that picture, our work, however small, is contributing to moving the needle on that. So, you know, in whatever opportunity that I might have to help move that needle, that's the overall objective.
Well, I think it's really interesting too that each of you has talked a little bit in a different way about the empowerment aspect that the internet can bring to a community. But you've also touched on the importance of control from an early stage. And I know this is something that we've talked a lot about recently, especially with, again, the deployment that's happening later this week. But like Kat's saying, that having those frank conversations early on and acknowledging the critical aspect of involving localities, local governments, local community leaders from day one to say, what do you need and how can we help? As opposed to, here's something that we have brought to you. It's critical. You guys are doing the same thing where you're going in and having these conversations and making sure that it's a partnership early on. And I think that that's a really important element to talk about. The equality of partners, but the understanding that a locality has the control over this kind of infrastructure moving forward. And I'd love to hear how each of you has approached that in your work, especially maybe if there have been times when you've had to take a back seat with your ideas for what a network looks like in order to be respectful of what the community is actually asking.
Yes, you know, it's all about, I think, communications. It's about open discussions with leaders, and to Kat's point, understanding their requirements. And then you're able to kind of work literally hand in glove to find the solutions that make most sense for these various communities. And I used Nunavut as an example. We do a tremendous amount of work with other Indigenous groups that act and operate their own community-based internet services. We deliver connectivity working with them as well, and we will train them so that they understand not just how to deploy, but also how to manage and maintain and to ensure a sustainability of the service in the long term. Very important. And then actually working with them as well, because requirements are not stagnant. Requirements actually continue to grow. And so it's keeping pace with technology. And that's where we come in. I mean, we're experts in what we do. We've been doing it for 50 years. So it's to continue to manage and maintain that relationship with them so that you can bring the services and that they're always at a level which is hopefully lockstep with what we call sort of southern-based services in Canada, but that they keep up essentially with what's available in the southern parts of Canada, and it's available anywhere across the country. And we will be doing that globally as well as we launch some of these new services. And we'll be able to provide that same level of access and working with locals in any country to deliver broadband connectivity to communities. We don't focus on the individuals specifically, but we focus on working with local governments and or local ISPs to deliver what is required within these communities.
So I'm going to talk about this in two layers, how Next Century Cities helps put our members in the driver's seat, and then how the local leaders that we work with help put their community members in the driver's seat. From the perspective of Next Century Cities, we really act as a facilitator of conversations and best practices. So we get the fun part of, getting to work with all of the communities across the country and learning a little bit about what works for everybody. And that means when a community comes to us and is exploring how they can get connected, we're able to point them in the direction of other communities who have done cool work, who they might want to talk to about developing their own model. So as I mentioned before, we're model agnostic. So when we work with our members, we're never going to tell them, hey, you should definitely build a municipal network, or you should definitely engage in a public-private partnership, because we're not really the ones who can make that decision. But what we do is we help them figure out what are the considerations that are on the table. How is the availability of infrastructure assets in my community, or the level of customer demand, going to help me inform what that model should be. And we also encourage them to do the same with their communities. So that next level is a city council or a tribal council can do all the work they can to come up with a plan for connectivity, but if that's not really what the community is looking for, or if people are really just interested in having access in homes, but they're not as interested in having access, in another part of the community, then that's not going to work. And so we've seen exciting initiatives from our communities across the country, strong community engagement projects. So we have folks who set up a website, and if you are interested in having connectivity in your home, you can put a pin on a map, and that's a way of measuring, exactly where demand is in the community. And then something else that we see that works well throughout communities is just really consistent engagement. So even if, as a local leader, you don't necessarily have an update about what's going on, sending out, a newsletter or holding a meeting anyway, just to keep community members engaged and talking about the issue, can really go a long way.
I think one of the key words is facilitating, and to actually bring the stakeholders to the table. And the idea of sort of co-creating a solution. So, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of design thinking, and the idea of kind of the first step of design thinking is empathy. And so how do you go out there and actually understand what is being impacted to the community? And you don't want to go in and dictate. And oftentimes what happens is that the money seems to talk the loudest. So you have these big, huge projects, billions of dollars of projects that are coming in, and nobody really pays any attention to the community until it's too late. And we see that often in Hawaii. There's a lot of attention being brought to projects that are huge in dollars, but very little in terms of how the community is responding to that. And oftentimes, indigenous communities are the ones last to the table. So how do you change that? And how do you bring the indigenous voice? And this is what I learned up in Inuvik. How do you bring that voice to the table as the solution is being created? And I think that is super important.
No, I couldn't agree more, and I do hope that that's part of what happens here is getting those voices together and starting to build those trust and the experience. Do we have a hand up, or did I catch you?
We saved the seat.
Yeah, please come on up.
I promise I wasn't just trying to upgrade my chair.
Yeah. No, we're happy to have you up.
Mahalo.
This guy's got a great radio voice.
When I first started working in TV, they told me I had a great radio face.
Oh, that's what they tell me.
Yeah. So I have a problem to throw out there, and if I'm getting ahead of myself, if we're going to cover this later, feel free to park it. And Burt, actually, you set me up kind of perfectly for that, so thank you. I'll give you $20 later. Okay. But Hawaii is at the nexus of all of these fibers going across the Pacific, right? I don't know how many terabits of capacity we have touching on our shores and moving along. Choke. And You know, Mauna Kea on this island is home to the most productive collection of astronomical observatories in the whole world, right? They are capturing so much data, and it's going somewhere. So we know there's capacity on the island, right? We know there's capacity here in the big pipes, and it's kind of that last little bit of getting to the user. You know, driving over from Kona this morning, I'm looking at the most productive astronomical observatories in the world and the unfathomable amount of data that they create, and my phone says no service. You know, I live in, you know, a pretty densely populated urban area, and I have only one choice of internet provider, and not super happy with them, but don't really have an option, right? So I don't know if any of you have any thoughts on that and kind of models that you've seen work in other places, just to close that last, you know, that last little link of stuff. Because I think one quick unique thing about Indigenous people in Hawaii is we're not necessarily in one place. You know, there are Hawaiian homesteads, there are communities like Uncle Bumpy's, but there's also lots of Hawaiians all over the place. And so in that sense, you kind of got to connect everybody to connect all the Hawaiians, right? When we talk about Indigenous connectivity, and our institutions and the institutions we connect with are all over the place. So it's not a matter of just connecting one isolated community. I think, you know, you mentioned a lot of the satellite work with the really isolated guys. This is a little bit different. We do have those super isolated communities, sometimes by choice. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this island, but some folks just come here for get away from everybody. Yeah, so that's kind of my quandary, trying to understand. One other quick thing about infrastructure on this island, we almost have a fiber loop, almost. There's like a couple miles missing. Burt, you're probably familiar with this. So if there's one goat who takes a bite in the wrong place somewhere, or one brush fire that takes down a fiber anywhere else, now you cut off, because we never had a loop, we had a C, so now you're cutting off part of the C. So I don't know if there are models to heavily encourage those who do have those big pipes coming in to invest a little more or participate in the solution finding of that kind of last mile stuff. And now I will let the smart guys talk.
I can talk.
I meant.
Okay,
yeah. But if they're not, I mean, by all means.
Well, you know, I appreciate you referring to the ladies as the smart guys, because, you know, I do have something to say, and I wanted to perhaps give a little bit of detail as to what you just brought up, which is we do have pipes coming in, but we aren't as well connected as you might think. There are terabits worth, but the only two projects that recently came in, one was called CUS, and the other one is called Hawai'i. All the other ones are old. And what's happening is that a lot of the trans-Pacific fiber cables are bypassing Hawaii. And the reason is because Hawaii has such a small market, and now the technology enables them to basically go from Asia to the continent without having to stop in Hawaii. So that's one issue. And in terms of trying to take advantage of the capacity that does come here, a lot of the connectivity that happens here, a lot of times they're interested in either traversing to the West Coast or connecting from the Asia market, and others cross-connecting in Hawaii to get to the Asia market. So you have Australia, New Zealand, and they're basically cross-connecting to get to other places. So that's one thing. So there is not necessarily this proliferation of bandwidth that is available and should be more ubiquitously shared. And what happens is that all the different legs of the infrastructure are controlled by different commercial interests. Okay, so once you got a project that's coming in from, let's say, Australia or New Zealand, that's one company. Once they hit land, that's another company. So that needs to be backhaul from companies like Hawaiian Tel and Spectrum. Now, one of the things that we could do, and what I've tried to do in the state is convene, and that's kind of bring people together. Hawaiian Tel, and they are a partner in enabling Pu'uhonua o Waimanalo to get connected. So I want to give them the proper props, because what they are able to do with rural broadband, and here's where the kind of the key point is, they get federal funds to run rural broadband. So they've gotten Connect America funds, and they're currently applying for USDA something called Reconnect funds. What they haven't done in the past, and this is what I'm trying to do, is they haven't really talked to the community about, if they're running fiber into a community, how does that enable that community to do better education, do better healthcare, do better community networks? So at the minimum, I can help to convene those kinds of gatherings so that if they're getting federal monies to run fiber to a location, can they now take it to another level of understanding what are the benefits to the end user? And can we tell, see, nobody cares about the story about the corporate, running fiber into a community. What people really care about is how does that community benefit from that? And so you want the story from the people in the community benefiting from what has, what is somebody else's sort of business model, but they're getting federal money. So if at the minimum I can help bring those parties together and help tell that story, or help not only tell a story, better yet, get the healthcare facility connected, get the school connected, get a community connected. That's the story that you want to tell.
And I think at the end of the day, you're right that it's doing a better job of telling that community story. I just want internet not to make this personal, you guys. I just want, for me personally, I would like for all my Dropbox files to sync and my Slack to stay updated while my baby girl watches Molly from Denali for the 10th time that morning. That's a wonderful show, by the way. If any of you guys are involved or familiar with that show, awesome show. But it's kind of that. Like, we have so many more utilities jumping onto this internet backbone without the growth of the, you know what I mean? Like, my cable is so bad that I have the Hulu with the live add-on, but it just drags everything down a little bit further, So I don't know, maybe this is a Kat question. Are there any models that, I'm sorry, I'm stealing your shine because I'm in the same chair. But are there any models that you've seen in the communities you've worked with that help to address some of that?
And I'm going to pass this to Kat in 1 second, but first I'm going to ask if one of y'all can wake up the clock, because I don't know how much time we have left.
We're going to elongate this session 10 minutes, and we're going to shrink the networking to 20 minutes. So I want you to go to 10:40.
Do you mind putting it on the
20 minutes and counting.
Oh, that works too, though.
Siri's got
And then I'll hand this over to Kat.
Okay, so I think we need Greg.
Someone can just flash me this and I'll wrap it up.
You have 18 minutes.
Perfect.
So I want to sit in that chair too.
Oh, go for it. Tag.
Sure. Well, I want to help answer it too.
I would appreciate that. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's a really important question. I wish that I had an out-of-the-box answer for you. But what I will say is that I think this is a really good example of something that Marielle Triggs, who is here, I think currently participating in the other session, Marielle with MuralNet, I heard her say once that a lot of this is not necessarily a technology problem, but it's a policy problem. And I think that this is a perfect example of that. Frankly, a lot of the policy frameworks, at least from my work in the US, are not necessarily designed to be really conducive to local community-based solutions, both in the way that we measure access and in the way that we determine eligibility for federal funding programs and things like that. And I think, to Burt's point, some of what we can do to help shift this is to bring those stories and the voices of communities that do need change into the Beltway and into other policymakers' conversation. So I would just encourage that. And then I'll turn over to Jeff.
So, again, my name is Jeffrey Blackwell. About 20 years ago, I had the distinction, I had the unenviable honor of being the first American Indian enrolled member of a tribe, first enrolled member of an American Indian tribe to work at the Federal Communications Commission. And I worked there twice. In between, I worked for the Chickasaw Nation, a very development-oriented tribe. And I wanted to bring the perspective because this is a very important element of building a community network. It's the last mile issues versus the middle mile issues versus the large trunking issues. So I was really impressed when I heard part of Burt's platform to be new undersea cable, new services, to bringing new services at that level. I guess the caution that I would offer in the room is that from my perspective, now that I'm back working in Indian country again, I co-chair the Technology and Telecommunications Subcommittee of the National Congress of American Indians. There are about 400 tribes it's the largest and oldest intertribal government body in the United States. And this time around, they also asked me to co-chair the parent committee, the Economic, Finance, and Community Development. That's just a long way of telling you that there are a lot of tribal governments and tribal leaders who come to our meetings. And every one of them, we like to say something that no one size fits all. So really, my perspective is that this movement over the last 20 years of indigenous needs and being on the other side of a very recalcitrant digital divide in Native communities, meeting up with the movement of community-based networks, there's really a lot here in common. Because Kat's right, there is a lot of thinking that needs to be changed, and part of it is that we really like our industries in the United States. The Commerce Clause in the United States Constitution is the most powerful part of that document, and there was a point in time where we had one company that was bringing telephone service. And there were parts of the country where that one company said, well, I really don't see a model there because there isn't a population density and I can't recover my costs. So that's the reason why we have a number of telephone co-ops in places like Iowa, who then turned into small rural telephone companies. And when the digital revolution came, struggled with the delivery of broadband at the local level. So you fast forward, and really there are a number of mechanisms, and I can say this because I own stock in that corporation, the FCC. I worked there for a while. I was a senior manager and was responsible for all of the tribal proposals. Helped the FCC start the Office of Native Affairs and Policy. And when we did that in 2010, we proposed a number of rules in 2011 that really kind of pushed the restart button on the thinking of how to get economic regulations working for rural and tribal America. So for instance, in the 2.5 gigahertz that you're going to hear about, there's a regulatory model called the tribal priority that recognizes the role of local tribal governments being a part of this same idea that there are places where industries will not go because that's not how they make their dollar. But local opportunity, localism, a business model that is predicated on localism or maybe even low-income opportunities. So my caution is, don't make the mistake that we did my first time around at the FCC and kind of pick one solution, because there are already solutions that have worked in certain places. It could very well be satellite. It could very well be some sort of fiber-based deployment. But there are going to be places where those solutions will not work. It's like by creating certain solutions, we, by definition, create other more recalcitrant strains of the digital divide. And it's going to take some creativity. It's going to take some ownership. The idea that I would give back to the panel is one thing that I recognized when I first came to Hawaii in 2011. So among the tribes, we we tease ourselves, we punish ourselves, we say, don't use that reservation thinking. Don't use that fort blanket thinking, sitting outside the fort, sitting on your blanket that the United States government is giving you, and taking their notions, taking their thinking. Here in Hawaii, I've talked with a number of community leaders that have said, don't use that plantation store thinking. We got to change the mindset first of not just being a consumer, but being an owner and an operator. And if you don't have that yourself, find the people in the community that can do that. So thank you.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Jeff. And that's a hugely important point, especially, I mean, the idea of you have to have a community leader who's going to take this forward. The problems exist all over the place, and they're incredibly frustrating. But it takes somebody saying, I'm going to fix it to make that change. And I think one of the things that the Internet Society does, and I know that each of you do in your role as well, is try and identify those people to help drive that work forward. Because if you don't have a local champion, if you don't have someone who's going to put in the time, it's very, very difficult to make things happen. With that, I know we're getting relatively close on time. I hope someone will flag me when it's like 10 minutes and 5 minutes, but I want to make sure we're getting to all the other questions in the audience as well. So, yeah, sure, Ed.
I have a question. We talked about access, we talked about empowerment to a degree, but one of the questions I have is what about...
For the live stream, I'm going to hand you a mic. Yeah, thanks.
I think one of the biggest problems that faces rural indigenous communities is the plight of young people leaving for a lack of opportunity. We're not talking about how the internet might be able to change that model as well, be able to keep young people within their communities to have viable options for employment, education, et cetera. So is there any thought or talk about that?
Appreciate that. Thank you. Anybody want to kick us off? Michele, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. So definitely bringing, broadband, quality broadband internet to communities is, in fact, a lifeline to keep the youth in these communities. In Canada, a lot of the youth actually had to travel outside of their communities to go to community colleges, and now they can take a lot of those courses online, and it's quality. I mean, they've got the bandwidth that they need and access to the right educational staff to stay within the community and to learn the skills that they need to properly function. A lot of the other examples have to do even with cultural experiences. A lot of broadcasting actually gets produced locally within the Indigenous communities up north, and they just had no means of actually easily broadcasting that out and broadcasting it out even to their other communities. So that's very important as well, including when you deliver and actually operate broadband networks. It's the training required and the IT skill set that you learn both through the installation, through the management, and maintaining those facilities in the communities. And again, you can stay within the communities because those are lifelong skills and jobs that you're going to need to maintain throughout. So we do find that there's a good number of youth now learning just basic more than basic, actually, advanced IP skill sets that are staying within the communities. So that's, just a handful of examples, but it's very important. And the communities actually do grow with the availability of broadband.
I'll just add quickly, I think you're right on. Something we hear across the board in the work that I do is that our youth are our most valuable export. A lot of our communities say over and over that they will leave for school and not return because they don't have the resources available to them to continue their coursework at home. And I think it's not just a matter of, keeping youth in the community, but also do youth have the tools that they need in order to reinvest in their communities? I think young populations are a really valuable resource. They want to make their hometowns great and invest in them and keep culture and language and tradition alive. And it's not just keeping them there, but making sure they have those connectivity resources to do that work when they are at home.
I'm gonna put Naomi over there on the spot because there's a panel later on that I tried to get a group called Purple Maya to come and talk. I'm in economic development, so I totally understand the supply, and I'm all supportive of the STEM types of educational opportunities. But you got to have the demand, and you have to create the demand in those communities, and you need to have the balance. So as much as what we're talking about, I think, has a longer term implication, maybe 5 to 10 years out. Because right now, I mean, what's happened and what's available right now is what's right now. So we can't change much of that. But if we can actually change the needle on new entrepreneurial activities, new businesses and new startups that come up in those communities. And Naomi, I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna put you on that panel because she is part of Purple Maya. She recently was involved with something called Purple Prize. They were able to get some funding from various donors. And what they do, and which is totally like novel, is taking indigenous knowledge and in our case, Hawaiian knowledge, Native Hawaiian knowledge, and intersection with that with technology. And how does that inform the solutions that get created? And can startups actually do something with that? And there are some very, very cool startups. We'll have one actually on a panel tomorrow. And I think if you look at that kind of a model, but again, it's 5 to 10 years out. But we got to get the kids trained, and then we got to get the startups and the companies formed so that now they have someplace to go.
Okay, and I know I've seen several hands, and I think we only have how many minutes left? Anybody? The clock is shut down, so I don't know. 5 minutes left. Okay, so I've seen 3 hands up front. Can y'all come just stand right here real quick, and we'll ask all 3 questions real quick, and then have the panel answer back to back. And Sally, I think, yeah, go ahead.
From my own perspective, and something that I noticed in Indigenous communities, when new things are being brought to those communities, there is a sense of fear. And that fear comes from colonization and intergenerational trauma. So my question is, with that, what are some of those challenges you faced when it comes to that intergenerational trauma and fear in Indigenous communities, and how have you responded to those challenges?
Thank you, and I'll grab your question and your question as well, and then we'll go.
Make a comment? Okay. So, hi, I'm Heather Hudson. Been working on communication and developing in remote areas for a long time, so I really appreciate these comments. I just wanted to summarize, because I think we've heard 3 things here that are all really important. One is having meaningful targets for getting broadband, and we have 25.3 in the US and 50.10 in Canada, megabits down and up. Those are moving targets, so keep your eyes on those. People need to hear. That might seem like a really trivial target in 5 or 10 years, so that's one thing. But second is enforcing and getting there, which is the point that several people were saying. And I think there's several ways we need to keep in mind. One is through regulation, providers that are out there, and we've heard about a few that are providing services but not meeting those targets. Sometimes funding, and we've heard about some targeted funds, especially for tribal land, sometimes spectrum. So moving that out. And then I think what Burt's point was very important too, which is the community outreach, working, and there are several people in this room who have done that in one way or another, helping the communities to understand both what the opportunities are if they don't have good service, but also how to put it to use. So we have kind of a multi-pronged strategy, and I'm sure there are lots of examples we can hear about during this workshop about how to make them work. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks very much. And then did you have a question also? Okay, please.
Hi, I'm Sally Braun. We got funding for a project to bring fiber to the home on the west side of James Bay. And how we did it was if you're going to deal with business, you have to speak their language, because they're not going to speak yours necessarily. It's all well and good to believe that, people are altruistic, but that's not really the case. What we did was we made it a pocketbook issue. We showed them how they could save money, how the government could save money if they brought in the last mile. And we proved it we went through all the studies that they had done. We looked at where the revenue was coming into the community now. How is it coming in? Where is it coming from? Is it coming from government subsidies, welfare? How is it coming in? Then we went to them with proof of how all that could change. The flow of money wouldn't be coming into the community. It would, from the government, and the government could save money and use that money somewhere else. So that's how we did it. And we raised $4.7 million. And we're going to bring fiber to the home to 957 homes. So I'll talk to you later about that. You got to talk their language.
Thank you so much, Sally.
I want to say something real quick.
I know, on time. We're just going to do like a 30-second wrap-up and answer to each question, if you don't mind.
Okay.
No, so please go ahead. I just wanted to say my spiel. So.
Okay, so I want to try to address a little bit about the intergenerational trauma that does exist. And I don't want to sound flippant about the idea of, think a victim, be a victim. You got to really kind of get out of that mindset. And I think for examples that we can actually access here, I would reach out to people like Bumpy and Brandon and find out what did it take for them to actually go from a disenfranchised community that could have been pretty much forgotten, right? And really fight for what it is that they wanted to fight for. And I want to also bring attention to another fellow that I think, I invited him to this conference, but he couldn't make it because he was taking care of his kids. But his name is James Michele. And he took and is currently taking a homeless community that's out in Waianae that are currently in a boat harbor area. And they fought for some land that they could actually move to. And in just talking to him, the amount of heart and commitment that they have to build a community that not only has a roof over their head, but actually has some technology that they could now do innovation, do development on this technology that can take them into the 21st century. You gotta find those champions, and you gotta find those people that aren't in the victim mode. They're in the, let's kick butt and let's, let's take no prisoners.
Do you want to do like a 10-second wrap-up? Because this will be the last pass-through.
Oh, my 10-minute wrap-up is, if you want to hear more of this, 10 seconds. If you want to hear more of this soapbox that I'm on, I have a panel later on this afternoon.
I want to thank you for bringing up that point, and I don't want to speak to something that's not my experience, but I would just say also as my wrap-up that this is why it's so important to put communities in the driver's seat, and why local solutions really give me hope for solving this issue across the world.
And my last point is if large corporations aren't working with you directly, there are alternate means, and you can bypass them. And, we've seen that, frankly, in our communities where they've created their own links, and there are alternatives, very good alternatives, cost-effective alternatives. You'll just have to kind of understand them, and you'll have the ability to build those services, and frankly, you could probably deploy them faster, easier, more cost effectively than sometimes working with the large corporations.
Absolutely. So a huge thank you to our panelists. We really appreciate y'all being here, and thank you also for all of your questions and your comments, and look forward to talking to you more.